Right, good to see you everybody. Welcome to Harvey Duckman Presents at Sci-Fi Scarborough. It is really good to be here on Zoom, even though we can't be here live at the spa. We are looking forward to being back there next year, right on the beach. But for today, you have some fantastic Harvey Duckman authors here to talk to you about the inspiration that we derive from all the things around us and all our lives to date. So, a few introductions first. My name's Kate Borcherel, and I write the Sim Cavalier novels, the cybercrime thrillers, and I also write obviously short stories in Harvey Duckman around Sim Cavalier stories, and also a little alien called Finch who is traveling around the galaxy, and a few other random ideas that pop into my head. But that's what we're here to talk about, which is inspiration. So I'm going to hand over to Mark to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Mark Hayes. I have been involved with Harvey Duckman since the very start, much like Kate. But I also write my own novels, Hannibal novels, as we see here. I don't know who she is, don't ask. And I write all kinds of things. My inspiration is basically everything, because I write a vast variety of stuff. As anybody who's read any of the stories I've written for Harvey Duckman will know. And I absolutely hate introducing myself, so I'm hiding behind this cup of coffee in order to do so. And I'm now going to hand you over to Tamara.
Hiya, so my name's Tamara Clelford. I write kind of technical thrillers, I think would be the genre we're talking about. I've got a story in Harvey Duckman, which is kind of a tech noir kind of feel. But I write kind of novels and short stories and a lot of stuff on popular science as well. So I will pass over to Robin next.
Hi, my name's Robin Moon. I've only just been published in Harvey Duckman 7 for the first time recently. But I'm kind of interested in sci-fi and horror. I write articles on like TV shows like X-Files and Buffy and things like that. And write some articles on horror films too, but I'm planning on definitely writing more short stories soon. So yeah, pass you over to Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz Tuckwell, and I've got 4 stories in the Harvey Duckman anthologies. All of my stories are, I would describe as alternative historical fantasy. Well, that's not the only types of stories I write. I also write science fiction, urban fantasy, and I've had some of those published as short stories and novellas as well. And I'll pass you over to Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter, and I've been in every Harvey Duckman that's been released so far. And anyone readers will know who I write about. The adventures of the talking rat Riz and his suffering human companion Brennan. I pretty much get my inspiration from folklore, and I use them to form the basis of the stories. Now,
There's a real mix of inspiration that everyone's bringing, and I think I want to go back to the very earliest inspiration that I remember, and I was caught reading this book under the desk in year 1 apparently. So my favourite game was scaring my friends with the picture of the Tyrannosaurus Rex at the start of chapter 5. I have very vivid memories of frightening everybody with this picture. So at the age of 6, I was already completely embedded in Doctor Who, and I wrote as many little Doctor Who books, little Doctor Who stories as I possibly could once I got a little typewriter when I was about 8 years old. So the inspiration around sci-fi has always been there, and obviously I was the right age to get the Hitchhiker's Guide when it was first broadcast, and just always embedded in that kind of thing. Didn't think I'd necessarily be able to write, but inspiration flows in very strange ways, and in terms of popular culture sort of inspiration, there's just this slew of fantastic sci-fi going backwards and forwards in all different media, and one of the things that really caught me was, when do I get really excited and really surprised and have that oh moment about something I'm reading. And one of the books that you can see is very, very battered, and I've just finished reading it again, is one of David Brin's books called Glory Season, because in there he very carefully crafts a world where you actually get shocked by a twist in the plot that you wouldn't have been shocked about in your own world. And I really loved his twist, and that became part of something that I did in the Sim Cavalier books. So that's kind of where I've got some of my inspiration around the popular culture side. I think for popular culture, Tamara is our girl right now. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your
Don't know what you mean. So this is going to come as a massive shock to people, but I grew up on a heavy diet of sci-fi, both TV and films. I know you're not going to expect this. And I've spent more hours of my life than I am ever going to admit to anybody in the Star Trek universe. And this book does come out very frequently in our house to answer questions. But it wasn't just Star Trek, obviously Star Wars, but also things like Raiders of the Lost Ark I was obsessed with as a child. And to be fair, I kind of still am as an adult. I watch a lot of sci-fi and TV, but I don't read sci-fi, which is kind of odd because like my visual world is very much embraced in there. My reading, the stuff that I love, are thrillers and kind of espionage thrillers. So Robert Ludlum, I adore. He's one of my favourites. Tom Clancy, love his work. I think probably the author that's actually influenced my writing style most is Dick Francis, which thanks to lockdown, I don't have a physical book. So here's an earbook of Dick Francis, just in case you don't know who he is. The entire collection is at my parents'. But it's really odd. These books never inspired me to write anything. I mean, look at Tom Clancy. I mean, seriously, look at that. 816 pages of seriously dense text. I'm not going to write that. Where do you fit that in when you have a day job and other stuff to do? So yeah, it's kind of from the popular culture stuff. I love it. I love the sci-fi stuff. I love the thriller stuff, but it never made me want to read. The person I blame, sorry, made me want to write. The person I blame for me ending up on this writing journey is my friend Katie, who wrote and published a book a few years ago. It's all her fault, because that made me go, actual humans that I know can publish books.
Thanks, Tamara. We've got a question actually saying, how do you stay motivated to write? Who would like to pick that up and tell us also about your inspiration?
Go on then, I'll pick it up.
Go on then, Mark, all yours.
I am absolutely terrible at motivating myself to write. And I think most of us are. And occasionally you have wild spurts, but when inspiration strikes, it's very difficult not to write. So you find yourself having an idea, making notes, suddenly throwing words at a page for half an hour, and then you've got an idea that you need to run with. In the next Harvey Duckman, I wrote a short story for it. It was always intended to just be a short story, and now I have the entire plot of a novel running around in my head that I'm going to have to write. But actually finding time to do that is very difficult, and finding the motivation sometimes is difficult because you hit a hard point in a story and you can suddenly just stop and just find it very difficult. But eventually the urge to write overcomes the urge to procrastinate and do absolutely anything else, because you have to get those words out. Most writers I know are very like that. You get once you start writing, you want to keep writing because you need to tell the story to yourself before you tell it to anybody else. Before you hand a book over to anybody else to read, you have to write the story for yourself because you don't know how it ends until you've written it.
That's very true. That's very true.
Inspiration, I think, well, my mother was my greatest inspiration because I'm dyslexic, so she forced me to read to her every night. and kept coming up with strange and weird books for me to read because I wouldn't read things I wasn't interested in. So she found a book called Roddy the Roadman, which was about road signs. And it was the men at work sign that would come alive in the night and do things. He'd step off his sign and they'd go and do things, and then he'd go back. And these are quite thick, well-written books that are impossible to find now, because believe me, I have tried, because I haven't read them for 45 years. I'd love to find a copy of those. But then
so, if anybody watching knows where we can find Roddy the Roadman, was that?
Yeah, if anybody
find Roddy the Roadman books, send us a link. Send us a link.
Yeah, I'd be amazed, because I've been looking for years. But, and in my teenage years, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, which got me into reading fantasy, which got me into reading Terry Pratchett and David Gemmell and Raymond Feist. And I fell in love, particularly with Pratchett. I fell in love with the writing style of David Gemmell, but the story style of Terry Pratchett, because he could tell very modern stories set in a fantasy world, and the stories are all about the characters. Everything else that goes on in the story is irrelevant if you don't have the characters right to start with. And I love Pratchett's characters. I love Gemmell's characters as well.
So Robin, you were nodding along there around the character side of things. Where do you get your inspiration from?
Yeah, I definitely agree that the characters are the core of the story for me. Like, I always have to plan out my characters properly beforehand, and then the story kind of forms around them, I think. Well, my parents read to me like for as long as I can remember when I was a kid. So I grew up on books, and I learned to read at quite a young age. So I was just obsessively read books like in school when I was a kid. I remember A Series of Unfortunate Events was my favorite book series when I was about 12. Like I just loved it so much. I thought it was just like amazing to me. Like, I thought the characters were like so quirky, and just the world that it was set in was like so bizarre. It just really fascinated me. And then when I got into my teenage years, that's when I discovered Neil Gaiman, who is my favorite author still. I've got like a few of his books up here alongside Stephen King. And yeah, I discovered Good Omens when I was about 15, I think. And I was just completely obsessed with that book. Like, I loved the characters. And again, it's one of those worlds where it's like so kind of based in like kind of British culture, I guess, and like just the kind of dry, sarcastic sense of humor and like quirky characters. But there's all this crazy stuff going on at the same time. So I always was really interested in things like that. Like I also grew up watching Doctor Who, which is a massive inspiration for me. Like, I watched it since it started in 2005. So I would have been about 5 or 6 at the time. And yeah, I watched that like all the way through growing up and absolutely loved it. I was just so, like, I just always lived in like fictional worlds. Like, I'd always daydream about like just traveling to strange worlds and stuff. And I also got into Buffy and X-Files as a teenager, which are like also like they're just always on my mind when I'm writing. Like, again, just the characters, and it's just all about like just strange worlds, I guess, but with like very real characters that you can relate to. I think those are things that I find myself attaching to quite a lot. Yeah.
I think one of the things, Peter, with your stories that I absolutely love is that one of the characters I really attach to is that rat. Please tell us more about your little furry friend.
Well, what can I say about this guy? We'll get the waves in there. I mean, Brendan Mason was one of those ideas that I look at have had, and I probably would never have another one like it since, because the characters themselves started off in a completely different genre. Because one of the first books I remember having a copy of my shelves was this very old and battered copy of All the World, H.G. Wells. And I grew up in a household where the musical was, like Jeff Wayne's musical version of it was played quite a bit. And so when I came to books, it was like a sci-fi books. And the Goosebumps series by R.L. Stein that really fed into my other books at a young age. I used to devour them. And then as time got older, I found other sources to like from popular culture that started making appearances. And I'm a snapper as well, kid. So yeah, I think you got a newer copy though. I mean, this is the commemorative edition from a few years back, and so all those things decided to like mix around in my head, and so when I started writing, I had all those influences, but they could never really find a proper way to show themselves. But then flash forward to 2017 when I wrote the first Brennan and Riz story, taking characters from another setting and put them on day and made one of them a talking rat, and I never looked back because they're the heart of every story. They're little arguments, the little disagreements. I mean, when I first wrote it, I didn't actually think people were going to like Riz at first because of how he acted and how unheroic he was in many situations. But it seems that everyone's really took a shine to him, which I don't know what that says. That's a good thing or a bad thing. Because I also say with their ventures, I look at like folklore, because there's tons of it around, and every time I find a new variant, it's fascinating just how the stories have changed. And I look at it and go, well, what would Brennan and Riz do if they were faced in this situation? How would Riz try to make money from this? I mean, one of the good things if I'm writing them as well is that on Twitter, I take part in the hashtag VSS365, which is every day you get a prompt and you do a short story tweet based on the prompt. And every day I bring in Riz story in that, and it helps develop the characters further. And then I learn some very interesting things about them, which may or may not work their way into the published books or like the published Harvey Duckman stories.
That's one thing about when you've got your characters established. I mean, we had a question there just before saying, do you know what's going to happen, or does the story create itself on the page? And it kind of creates itself through the characters, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have tried to plot
Liz,
before, but characters just run around. So I've tried to plot before, but the characters just run around and do what they want to do. Especially Riz, you try and say, well, we're going to do that, but it's like, actually, no, Riz doesn't want to do that. That's not how Riz is. So it goes on a tangent.
Liz, do you find a similar kind of thing? I mean, we haven't talked yet about your inspiration. It's been really good to hear from you.
I was just thinking about my Tully stories, which are set in alternative Rome, and I think they are alternative history fantasy. I was just thinking I've got quite a few not very science fiction inspirations, because I read the I, Claudius books when I was younger, and I watched the I, Claudius series, and I've got it on DVD. And also, when I was very young, I watched the Pompeii series, which none of you probably remember. And I just loved.
I know.
Yeah, seen it.
Lurkio the slave in that, and also Carry On Cleo. So I wanted to write an alternative Rome, but not a very serious, because sometimes Roman Empire history comes across as very pompous. And one of the things I loved about the I, Claudius was it showed more of the senior side of Roman history, and I also liked it. It didn't take the other, like Up Pompeii, it wasn't taking it seriously, and it was humorous. So they were some of my inspirations for the Tully stories. And also I have to say, it was actually doing Latin at school, which made me interested in Rome anyway. And I've started relearning Latin on Duolingo. And one of the things that fascinates me is it occasionally things like keeps talking about drunk parrots or ebrius piscicus. So I'm thinking, I've got to work a drunk parrot in somewhere to a story.
Excellent. Oh, that's brilliant. Actually, that's I'm just thinking, because you're right, obviously the parallel Rome and the historical side of things, and Peter, you've been drawing on folklore, and I draw on current day tech and push it into the future. We did have a question saying, what genres does sci-fi blend well with, and why? It actually, sci-fi is every genre. You can write romance, you can write, I think Mark's put a little note on here as well, so it literally is, it's the setting for what the characters do, and the characters may do things that are romantic or thriller based or whatever, and that current day inspiration is always there behind whatever genre you're writing. I hate pigeonholing books, I really, really do. So yeah, sci-fi and thriller are two different genres, but I write sci-fi thrillers.
There's a Terry Pratchett quote on that I absolutely love, which was, you write deeply informative satire about the state of humanity, how we govern ourselves, how politics works, how people interact, how people think, and you stick one dragon in it and they call it fantasy.
That's also true. It really is. It really is. So I thought we had another question there. Oh, no. So in terms of the sort of the current day things and the things that spark off that writing process, who was jumping in on that? In terms of the current day, in terms of current day inspiration, because as I say, I take a lot of mine from cybercrime. So when I wrote my first few lines in Bitcoin Hurricane, so the first novel I wrote, because I'd written non-fiction before that, I literally woke up one morning and heard a news story and thought, hold on, that's part of this story that's been in my head, and I wrote the first 300 words, and then that got me off on the first book. So that things that are around all of the time are sometimes things that give you an inspiration. So yeah, very much it's emotions and places. I've just had this, there's a note on coming through on Facebook from Susan saying emotions, places, experiences. Absolutely. I've just started the 4th Sim Cavalier book and I couldn't work out how to start it, and I happened to be flicking through some channels and there was a Grand Designs on refurbishing something really impossible, and I'm like, oh, yes, he's sitting staring at the sky and wondering why he's refurbishing this thing, and suddenly the book has started. So anyone else got one of those examples?
Well, I went on a cruise a couple of years ago with my sister-in-law and my mother-in-law, and obviously you meet lots of different people on a cruise, and there was a Canadian gentleman on there who took a shine to my sister-in-law and was basically almost stalking her. And I just thought it was really interesting. I thought, because you meet people and you take them at face value, you don't really know what they're like. They can, you know, they can present a completely false persona on this type of experience, because how can you validate who they are? And that gave me inspiration to write a fantasy story about a serial killer on a cruise ship.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a jump like that. Tamara, I mean, your tech noir short story in the latest Harvey Duckman makes me not want to ever annoy you. Where did the inspiration come for that one?
Well, on all the fiction stuff I've written, it started in fact. It's something that I've experienced, I've read about, that's happened to me. The book that I've got that's hopefully going to be published this year started at a holiday in New Zealand, and about a plaque that I read. More details on Mark's blog if you want to find out how I wrote that by accident. But the story in Harvey Duckman, I still work in engineering. I spent 10 years working in a large engineering company, living in an anechoic chamber, essentially doing radio frequency measurements. Great fun. But the experiences of being one of the few women physicists in an engineering company, you get some fun times. So yes, some of that stuff in that story is true.
I love the description of some fun times. I've read that story. Some fun times is a worrying. a worrying thought in that case. It's a
Yeah.
good story,
But yes, there's, you know, there's some bits of truth in there. We very quickly work into a world of fantasy, and I'm not going to tell people which is what's true and what's not. You can decide that for yourself.
I'm starting to become slightly concerned about the body count in your lab. Just saying.
I'm just, you know, people just stop turning up to work sometimes. It happens.
Clearly, yeah, that is the reason. They just stop turning up for work.
Yeah.
Definitely relate to Tamara with what you're saying about basing it in your real experiences and things like that, of like women being underestimated and things like that, because that was kind of the basis for my protagonist in my story as well, about how like people don't really suspect her, like with her being a woman and things like that as well. So I was sort of dropping those kind of things in. So I definitely get what you mean with that. But it's a lot of fun to kind of channel your like experiences and like have that kind of catharsis in like putting mine onto the page, because, you know, assuming you don't actually murder people in real life, then obviously it's a good way to get it out on the page, like, and just talking about your experiences. So I really like that.
All writers draw from their own experiences. They have to, because it's all you've really got to work with. Otherwise, you're just plagiarizing the last film you saw. So all characters somewhere are drawn from from people you know, and often from yourself, which is worrying in my case for people who've read the Hannibal books. But no, I am not Hannibal. I am not remotely like Hannibal whatsoever. It's my excuse.
I have to say, I think that everybody on this forum is reasonably innocent of anything in the cannibalism, murder sort of thing. Apart from that rat, I really do worry about Riz.
Well, it makes me feel better. He wasn't always a rat, so, you know, what goes? He's led a very interesting life.
Yes, I'm more and more fascinated in what happens to Riz. I mean, Liz, in terms of your parallel Roman side of things, you're obviously bringing the current experiences, crews, and so on into those stories. What other inspirations do you find that come into the Tully books?
I'm trying to think. What else inspirations.
Or into your
I think some of them. I like, my first story was actually based on a Roman myth, or rather a Roman story, which was about a ghost, and I just embellished it a bit. But the other stories are actually based partly on historical facts, like there did used to be a real problem with pirates in Roman times, and the other one was actually based on Roman mythology, which is about statues and and how the Roman gods and goddesses couldn't actually appear as themselves. They had to appear as different things, because if a human actually saw them, they basically evaporate on the spot. So I'm not sure I use much of current times at the moment for my Tully stories, but I do use
history. What you said
history.
about pirates actually resonated a little bit. I know we're into the last section of this panel. It's written, we've got a lot of people online, and it's good to see you all here. So pop your questions in, because you haven't got long. But one of the things you said there around pirates, that's an interesting one, because one of the things that I find with inspiration for writing is having something to focus on. So with the Harvey Duckman Presents anthologies, we've got the 7 Harvey anthologies now, just with a real variety of things. And there are 2 where we've gone down the road of...
There's 9, Kate. Not 7.
Yes, but the 7 plus the 2 that are specials. So, and I know I can't count much. So, but the 2 specials are really on a single word. So the most recent one was pirates, and you think, I can't write a story about pirates, and then in your head, the pirate starts to do things.
Yes.
So yeah, who else has found that just one single thing focuses you down onto a story?
Oh, I've written entire stories that are based on one joke, and the joke's a few lines long, but it becomes a story. And the story comes about getting to the punchline. The most important thing with any story, when you're trying to write it, particularly short stories, is trying to know the ending. I'm slipping into the next
questions, yeah.
by talking about stories, so I'll stop now. But yeah, the one thing I would like to say, all the writers here have written for Harvey Duckman. We continue to write for Harvey Duckman, but anybody can write a story for Harvey Duckman if they want, or try to.
That's very true.
We'll read anything that somebody submits. We'll give advice to people who need advice. If you want to try and write a story, if you want to try and get published, short stories are a great place to start.
Yes.
And also they're great things to read. And at least one person must have a Harvey Duckman close to hand they can hold up. Yay!
I know my bookshelves. So.
So I will drop a link in.
We've all picked up a different one. I love that.
Because it's just occurred to me we should probably do that.
Yeah, that is a good moment to say yes. Harvey Duckman. One of the inspirations behind Harvey Duckman is to encourage people who haven't necessarily taken that plunge of writing to actually get into a forum where they will be properly read, properly edited, properly helped to actually produce something that's really interesting and can go into the anthologies. And we have had we've published 137 different short stories over the 9 books already. There are 58 different authors in there. The youngest is 12 years old, the oldest into their 70s. We have authors from the north of England and then going out across the country into Europe, to India, to Australia, and to America. So really, anyone who's got got an inspiration to write, this is a really good place to start your journey with the Harvey Duckman anthologies. You're being very good company. I'm conscious we're getting towards the last few minutes, and we do have a couple of questions. So, question for Tamara: do you always write crime?
Not really. That came about from the kind of the thought piece that set that off is like, what do we do with people at work that annoy you, kind of thing, and that ended up down the crime route. So having said that, I am writing a story about an evil genius at the minute, so that's kind of borderline crime. Sometimes
Okay. Another question, this one possibly for Mark, just because I know how much universe is going on here. How many books can you see yourself writing in your universe, Mark?
Oh, good God in heaven. I'm currently writing the 3rd Hannibal book, but I'm also currently writing the 2nd Maybe book, which is set in the same universe but 200 years before. But all of that also fits into the Passing Place universe, in which everything I've ever written fits into the Passing Place universe. Because why wouldn't you have a time-traveling, multi-dimensional creature that's also a piano bar and grill?
Completely fair.
So because it's fun to occasionally drop characters from one story into another story and back out again. And I can also do fun things with the Passing Place. There's lots of little Easter eggs in the Passing Place novel. There's David. My brain is not working. I have Neil Gaiman's Death just sat at a table in the bar, drinking a cup of tea and making a few people slightly nervous. And I don't mention who she is. I just describe her, and then she's in there for about half a page. But I do that, and Neil Gaiman can't sue me because I've never used her name.
Not a word. Not saying anything, not live on
I
Facebook.
know I do occasionally get messages from people who noticed, but the only person who's ever noticed absolutely every little Easter egg that's sitting about in my books would be me, because I'm the one who put them there.
I love putting Easter eggs in books. Easter eggs in books are very cool. I'll answer that question for mine, because I've got all sorts of books going on. So my writing in my universe will continue as long as the characters want to do things, and they keep wanting to do things. I mean, I've got my running, my triathlete character, and he's got to get to the Olympics one day. So, you know, that's got to happen in one of the books. So yeah, they will keep going as long as as long as the characters want to do things. So I have my little globe-trotting alien, and as long as they want to keep going round the galaxy, then they can keep having their adventures, and that will turn from multiple short stories probably into a bit of a collection, and we'll see where they go from there. So it all comes back to the characters and the idea of where those characters want to go, and sometimes they just want to go on their own. So that's enough for me. I've got a question for Robin now, saying, what is the next step in your writing journey?
Oh, well, I'm still writing articles at the moment for a website about horror films and TV shows and things like that, which has been really fun. But I'm definitely planning on writing more short stories. Like, I've always got some ideas floating around. I'm always like building stories in my head. It never really goes away, I guess. So yeah, I'm always thinking of the next thing. I definitely want to write a novel at some point. So it'll happen one day. But yeah, I'm still writing away, planning on submitting to more places and things like that. So yeah.
Fantastic.
There's at least one other story already submitted for one of the upcoming Harvey Duckmans.
Yeah, I do.
Really good. So there you go.
Thank you.
Liz, any last words from you about your inspiration and your writing journey?
No, I was just going to say that I've been told by Sixth Element and Gillian Hatton, who published Harvey Duckman, that if I write 15 Tully stories, they'd be happy to publish them as a collection. So I've only written 4 so far, so I've got a way to go on doing that. I will get round to that sometime. I'm gradually getting up to the tally.
Fantastic. Peter, where's Riz going? Any last words from the wonderful rat?
We did say something, but I can't repeat it in front of a live audience. So, but I have a notebook full of 60 story ideas. So I've already written 22 Brennan Riz short stories. Their first novel is due out very soon. The second one just needs finishing. So they're not going away anytime soon. You know, Brendan might throw them out a window before then.
He'll
bring out the ratapult that keeps threatening.
Excellent. Tamara, where are you going with your journey?
So I've got a character that's roughly based in kind of present day, but then I've got a short story about her granddaughter. So I've got some stuff that's set in the future. I've got ideas about stories about this character's grandmother, so I've got stuff that can be set in the past as well. So I've got like a whole little world of timeline merging stories coming together in my head, and then other little ones that we were talking about inspirations earlier, little ideas about little things like this cute little bear who will be coming to a Harvey Duckman soon.
The cute little bear, yes. That is a story to come in one of the later Hannah.
So this is
not
the bear.
It's all terrifying.
So when you read that story, you have a face for the bear.
Oh, I'm starting to get worried about that bear.
You need to be worried about the bear. Trust me, being worried about the bear is exactly what you should be.
Excellent. This is why I love Harvey Duckman, because there is so much, you can get so many extra little nuances into a short story. It's been fantastic to have everybody here today, and thank you very much to the live audience who've been bombarding us with so many really good questions. I hope we've covered them all, but we will be lurking around on Facebook to answer any other questions that appear, because this will be on our Facebook page forevermore now. So thank you very much to Mark Hayes, to Robin Moon, to Liz Tuckwell, to Peter Martin, to Tamara Clelford for joining us today. We will be back live in around about 25 minutes to talk about the craft of short stories. But for now, the Harveys are really glad to have been here, and thank you everyone for joining us, and cheerio.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for hosting,
Bye.
Kate.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.